Today is August 1st. It's the public library in Lavonia, Georgia, and I'm speaking with Mr. Milton Priest. And Mr. Priest, could you tell me a little something of your experiences during the World War II era?
Well, I graduated from high school in 1943, and in August I was in basic training at Camp Wheeler in Macon, Georgia, Army infantry training. And I went through 16 weeks of basic training, and I reported to, after a delay en route from basic training, I reported to George Meade in Maryland, and about 3 weeks later, we were shipped out from Camp Patrick Henry for European operations. I landed in Italy at the end of January 1944, and we were shipped over as replacement for infantry divisions. I was over there a week, and I was assigned to the 88th Infantry Division. And this division was the first all-selectee division formed after the war started. They were activated in 1942, and they were shipped over in 1944 also. And I was assigned to G Company, the 350th Infantry Regiment, the 88th Division. And in May, at the first offensive on May 11th, 1944, I was in the front lines, and we went off on at midnight of May 11th, and that was our first offensive, and that was called the Rome-Arnold campaign, and of course, we sustained heavy losses. And the main purpose, of course, everything prior to that jump-off date, Angio Beachhead was formed or made about 3 months earlier. And they were stalled on the beachhead, and one of the purposes of our action was to break the Gustav line, which the Germans have established, and to join up and break out those divisions that were stalled on the beachhead. And I guess militarily, all things seemed to work in order, but of course the basic infantryman, he only knows the world within the 12 guys he's assigned to in the squads. And of course, our knowledge of the things going on at that time was pretty limited. Immediate vicinity. And I was a BAR man of the platoon, and a company BR, and which was, I don't know how I got to be that way. But usually the BR drew all their enemy fire, because they had its own distinctive sound, and they knew what weapon it was. And, but we joined up, and we drove on through until we liberated Rome on June 4th, 1944. As I've read later, of course, General Mark Clark was a theater commander, and he knew of the proposed D-Day landing, the Overlord project, and I guess he had decided that he was going to capture Rome before D-Day. And of course, it was the first Axis capital freed of the enemy. And of course, we were overshadowed by the D-Day landing 2 days later. Of course, and it always ended up that we were in a forgotten war, unforgotten fronts. And, but we went on to distinguish ourselves all the way up to Italy until the Brent Pass, and that's where and we were there when the Germans surrendered in Italy. And we had 360 days of combat within the time that the division was over there. We had 2 Medal of Honor winners during that time. We sustained 95% casualty rate during that time. And one of the Medal of Honor winners was my company commander. And he was of German descent from Pennsylvania. And he was honestly the best officer I ever served under. And he was lenient, but he could also be strict. And as an example, during the liberation of Rome, my buddy and I, which was my assistant BAR man, of course they gave us a break right in Rome, in the middle of Rome. We marched in, didn't ride, we marched. And of course all the friendlies, all the natives, they were passing out wine, and flowers, and girls were kissing her and all this stuff. And unbeknown to us, our company moved out. We didn't know it. So we said, well, we'll never ever find them. So the first thing we did was report ourselves to the MP that we had the company moved off without us. And so they said, well, you tell us where you're staying and we'll be in touch with you. Well, day 1 went by, 2, 3, 4. We went back and asked them what's happening. He said, well, we haven't found out where they are yet. So I told my buddy, I said, well, we better get started on our own. We know we're headed north, so if we follow the main road, we might find them. So we searched for another 3 days. And we bummed food and wherever we saw a mess tent or an outfit that was bivouac, we'd join in and they'd feed us. We'd take off the next day. So anyway, we kept riding and riding and walking and we got so far ahead, I guess, of anyone else that our own planes were strafing us. So I said, well, we better get back. And I guess we rode back, or walked back maybe about 5 miles. And we happened to run into, we saw one of our trucks with our division numbers on it. And we asked where our company could be. And they told us, and we walked in there, and the platoon sergeant, he admonished us, and because that we had got separated from the company, and so anyway, the company commander, he talked to us later, and he said, I'm glad you're all right. So he said, you should, in the event you're going to fall out, for some reason or other, you pass on that weapon to someone else. Well, after we explained what happened, I guess he sort of understood. And my buddy and I said, well, I think we got out of this all right. So it turned out he ended up on KP for 2 days. And that night, about 10 o'clock, they come and got me, and they were digging a sump. You all know what they are. They're about 12 by 12 by 6 to 8 feet deep to dump refuse in. And I was digging way past midnight with 2, 3 other guys. So that was my punishment. But it could have been a lot worse. But my buddy and I stayed together. We are still very good friends. We see each other 2, 3 times a year. And, we've kept in contact all through those years.
Where does that gentleman live?
He lives in Orlando, Florida, named Don Haskins. We became real close. We were separated when I was assigned to the company. He went on to grave registration, if you know what that is, and which is a very nasty job. But it had to be about a month later or so that I sit beside the road, and this sergeant comes up the road with 4 or 5 men with him, and they were coming up to fill the ranks as replacement, and he was one of them. And so I asked my sergeant. I said, you know, can I get him in our squad? He said, why, sure. So we've stayed close together. We've been through a lot over the years, and but I came back in after I viral pneumonia. I went to hospital, and they shipped me back to the States. And I got back to the States in toward the end of 1944. And of course, I didn't have enough points to get out of the service. That's where they determine your discharge dates and the number of points. And so I stayed in service for almost a year, or about a year later. And I was separated out of the Army in February of 1946 from Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. And that was the end of my active military. I did, however, join the reserves in 1949 and served 25 years with them, and retired from the reserves. So that was my military.
You mentioned your duty was
BAR, Browning automatic rifle.
And you've brought with you your medals in that frame there. Could you tell me a little bit about them? And I understand that the Bronze Star is among them there.
Yes. The Bronze Star, which ranks higher than any other I have, sits up here on top. You have 2 campaign medals, the European Theater, American Theater, and a Good Conduct Medal. This is my Army Reserve 20-year medal, and my Victory Medal. This is the Combat Infantry Badge, which probably I cherish most of all. Our division, as I said, the first all-selectee division to go into service. The Military Review College in Washington several years ago did a study on combat effectiveness of all the divisions that were in that. And I think there was something like 24 or 26 divisions that were evaluated on combat effectiveness. Of course, the top 10, 9 of the top 10 divisions were German as far as combat effectiveness.
In what year would that have been?
Well, during that war year.
During,
in Europe. And the 88th Infantry Division, my infantry division, sat right in the middle of those. They were 5th from the top. combat effectiveness. I don't. It adds a lot of credence and pride, you know, to have served in that outfit. And that was comprised of the U.S., the British forces, and they were all divisions from those countries. And it all boiled down to the fact, I believe, and it was their assumption, that our commanding general, General John Sloan, was actually an Annapolis graduate. And but he had, they used to call him all spit and polish, and he was real strict on military courtesy and everything else. And I think the main thing that set him apart from the rest were that when that division was formed, of course, they had a pool of officers that that the War Department assigned to the divisions. So instead of just accepting these people, or these officers, or cadre, he sent his own men to where they were located and interviewed each one of them. And they passed or passed a lot of them. So they really skimmed off the cream of the crop. And for some reason, this esprit de corps that these people brought together with us, to us, just filtered down to all the commanders, sub-commanders, and all the way down to the private on the squad. And the German, several German diaries were captured, and they said that if their intelligence told them where the 88th Division were, they knew that that's probably where the main brunt of the force was going to be, you know, action would come from. And, in fact, they dubbed us as shock troops for Fifth Army.
If I threw another couple of names out, could you tell me what you thought of General Patton?
Well, he was in Italy for a while, and I never met him or never saw him. But the terrain that we fought in most of the time was not tank suitable anyway. And I can, except when we got up on the plains of in that area, it flattened out. They could operate pretty well. But most of all the action that took place from say 100 miles below Rome all the way up to the Full Valley was mountainous terrain, and I guess I maybe saw 10 to 12 tanks during that time. And,
did you feel like you were off by yourself with your company sometimes?
Yes, a lot of times we were supplied by mule train, and we were supplied by airdrop. And we were like 20, 30 miles in the mountains, and no normal means of supply could take place.
Did you ever see or hear General Montgomery from the British forces, or those?
No, I knew where the British forces were, but I met quite a few of them, and but I never met any of the general officers. And,
what were the Italians like?
well, they were real friendly. Of course, the language was the biggest barrier, but all in all, they were. I think they were glad that the war was over for them. And as far as the fighting capabilities, the Italian army wasn't that great, and But they turned out to be a lot of our mule skinners that brought up supplies. They used to take back wounded and things of that nature.
Those were Italian patriots, or who were the mule skinners? And
Italian, they were ex-soldiers.
Really?
Probably.
Had they been captured or volunteered?
Yeah. Of course, Italy surrendered and they captured Rome.
Of course.
So they were used in a lot of different ways, you know.
When did you return home?
I returned, you mean, from over there?
Stateside, or yes?
When I came stateside, towards the end of '44.
And was that hard, or not so hard?
Well, I expected that after my bout with pneumonia, and that I would be back in the division, and at least in some capacity. And but evidently, the doctor that was taking care of me, when he mentioned the zone of interior, I knew what that was, and he said, "I'm going to send you back to the zone of interior, which is the U.S." So yes, I was glad to come back.
Can you tell me something of your connection to this county, to Franklin County, and this part of Georgia?
The bulk of the selectees or draftees that filled this division were from the Northeast, and that's where I'm from. I'm born and raised in Vermont. I worked for General Electric for 25 years. They transferred me to Atlanta, Georgia in 1978. I retired in 1985, and I bought a lot on the lake up here, and here I am.
Is there anything you remember about joining up, about your first impressions during that World War II era?
Well, my dad was in the First World War, so I had a lot of, well, I guess insight maybe of what it might be like. And of course he was in a horse cavalry, and with that, he died in 1949, 3 years after he got out of service, 52. Never did really get to know him as a man. I knew him as my dad, but not as a man. Yeah, had some feelings about joining up, and of course all my buddies were going in. My brother had gone in 1942, a year before I did, and so I felt that it was my duty, and I can remember Pearl Harbor Day on Sunday morning. I can remember it plain today as the day it happened.
Where were you?
At my parents' home, and we're just getting ready to eat lunch. And when I came over the radio, and, but yes, I think I was anxious to join. And I think probably with an experience like that, and most of the people would agree with me, that you come out with a whole different set of values that kids or men our age then have now. And because the values, you know, when your life is on the line all the time, you know, the values change. And, so you get to come out with those types of values which would be impossible to come out with today. And I look at my grandchildren today and I said, man, you know, as far as sense of values, I don't see that many surfacing yet, you know. But hope to God that they never have to serve in any obligation like that again.
Did you do basic training?
Camp Wheeler, Georgia.
Camp Wheeler?
Yeah. And I swore then I'd never dig a hole in red clay like I did then, and here I am back digging today. It hasn't changed.
Were you married? When did you marry?
I married in 1952. Had 3 daughters. My wife died in 1960. I remarried in 1970. And so I had 2 daughters living in the Atlanta area and one up Pennsylvania. But I'm glad to be here. And in this area, I love it. And I hope someday I'll be accepted.
Well, speaking warmly and welcoming, I'm really grateful for your time on this tape. Is there anything you'd like to say if a younger person was watching from another generation? If you were speaking to an audience of younger people, high school or college age, what would you leave them to think about that era?
Well, I just hope that they don't forget that happened. I read in the papers different occasions that kids of that age, college age or high school age, they don't even know anything about it. It's not taught. It's not in any books or anything else. And but I believe that if a person feels that if they are treated like a person, a man, and then I think that like the golden rule says, you know, treat thyself as you'd like to be treated yourself. And I think if they come away with that, and just try it, I don't think they would ever comprehend the things that we went through, but I hope they don't have to. But if they recognize the fact that it did happen, and that there's a lot of people that were hurt, injured, killed, that I guess the biggest thing is that we're not forgotten, that generation.
Thank you very much, sir.